How was it possible that a group of individual investors managed to manipulate GameStop stock? Introduction. The purpose of this video is to explore the ability of hedge funds and individual traders to manipulate the stock prices of GameStop stock through short selling and social media influence, in this case, a group of Reddit users. Short selling, very simply put, refers to when hedge funds borrow stock at a certain price and then sell it with the hope that the price of the stock will now fall. They buy back the stock at a lower price than what they have sold it for and keep the difference. For example, I borrow a baseball card from you, I sell it for 100 Rand and then the price drops to 80 Rand. I now buy back the card, keep the 20 Rand for myself and give you back your baseball card. The problem identified will be investigating using soft systems methodology, in particular the 7 stages description. However, some dynamic thinking tools will also be utilized, such as behavior over time diagrams and causal loop diagrams. The soft system approach recognizes that within any situation lies a number of unstructured problems. This is primarily driven by people, the different ways to which they react and think about a situation and how they relate to one another. The application of systems thinking is required when conducting the soft system approach. Stage 1. Stage 1 of the 7 stages description involves gathering as much information of the problem as possible. It is critical to understand the situation as clearly as possible. Let's start by exploring the Reddit and GameStop stock phenomenon. It all started in September 2019 when Keith Gill noticed that GameStop Corp had 65.5 million shares and that 55 million of those shares were short. Making Reddit users aware of this, a lot of the Reddit users decided to buy GameStop shares. This caused the stock price to go up and not down as the hedge funds hoped. Basically, this is what is called a short squeeze. A short squeeze is the opposite of short selling, where instead of borrowed stock going down after it is sold, it now goes up, meaning that in order to give the borrowed stock back, the hedge funds need to buy it back at a higher price than what it has sold it for. The hedge fund needs to decide to either wait in the hope that the price will go down again or sell it in order to minimize the loss. In the case of GameStop, the hedge fund sold over 157% of GameStop stock short, hoping that selling it and publicly announcing the sale would make the price go down, making them millions. However, with the Reddit users starting to buy the stock, the price went up from costing a few dollars to over $300. It increased the value of GameStop from $200 million to $70 billion. This caused the hedge funds and short sellers to lose $70 billion, and over 5,000 US firms were affected. The effect was even escalated by bigger trading professionals seeing an opportunity to make profit by getting involved in the buying of GameStop. On the other hand, Reddit users were making a lot of money. Keith Gill invested $53,000 and made $48 million. 9 Wall Street titans made a combined of $16 billion. Suddenly, communication between Redditors were banned on Discord, and Facebook stepped in and banned Robinhood stock traders. The Robinhood trading app banned investors from buying GameStop stock, only allowing the selling of the stock, knowing very well that this will result in the price to fall. Hedge funds began to sell the GameStop stock between them in order to force the stock price down again. Stage 2 of the 7 stages description involves expressing the problem situation. Here you will describe the problem and identify the key stakeholders involved and how they interact with one another. We will make use of a rich picture to do this. A rich picture visually presents the problem which you are analyzing, as well as the system within which it operates. Although, normally, when you are doing a rich picture, you will include as many diverse people as possible to tap into various mind maps. I have attempted this rich picture on my own. Okay, so firstly, you would describe the problem situation using the information which you have gathered in stage 1. Here we have identified the ability of individual investors and hedge funds to manipulate stock prices as the main problem. I have identified the key contributors to this problem. We have identified social media, individual investors, hedge funds, regulations, trading apps, stock markets, and possibly banks. Thirdly, we will break each of these individual contributors down to see the extent of their influence on the system. Social media. The key players here were Facebook, Reddit, and Discord. With Facebook and Discord banning communication between Robinhood stock traders as well as between Redditors in an attempt to stop them from working together. In the meantime, Redditors used Wallstreet bet forum to communicate with one another and influence one another to purchase GameStop stock. All of these attempting to influence the GameStop stock prices. Individual investors started to target hedge funds by working together to buy GameStop stock when they realized that the hedge funds were short selling the stock by information that was available on the web. Hedge funds. The hedge funds were short selling the stocks. Okay? They were also communicating their intention to sell stocks publicly in order to manipulate the stock prices down. They were also working together and selling stocks between them in order to influence the stock prices. Seemingly, they also had an influence on trading apps by funding the apps. Trading apps. Subscriptions to trading apps increased significantly, especially since they were no longer charging any commission. Apps such as Schwartz, TD Ameritrade, and Robinhood were restricting trading of GameStop stock by no longer allowing the buying of stocks but only allowing the selling, again manipulating stock prices down. Stock markets also played a role, with Wallstreet putting pressure on Robinhood to stop users from buying GameStop stock, thus manipulating the stock prices down. Bigger trading professionals also got involved by buying GameStop stock and making billions in the process. Regulations, or the lack thereof, seems to be the biggest contributor to the problem in this system and is also identified as the leverage point. With freedom of speech basically allowing insider trading on social media, with hedge funds being allowed to short sell stocks, to communicate their intention to sell stocks, to work together to sell stocks between themselves, all in an attempt to influence GameStop stock prices. With billboards being allowed to be erected to motivate people and encourage them to basically participate in the short squeeze. With trading apps allowed to restrict the trading of GameStop stock, with individual investors allowed to trade freely and all information being available on the web. With Wallstreet and hedge funds being allowed to put pressure on trading apps through funding, all point to the lack of regulations. This was also not an isolated situation, as the same happened to Nokia and AMC movie theaters. Stage 3 of the 7 stages description involves the formulation of root definitions relevant to the system. A tool that we are going to use at this stage is the CAT-WOW. The CAT-WOW will give the following consideration to the problem. Firstly, who are the customers in the system and how are they affected by the issue? The customers in the system we are discussing can be identified as the individual investors and the hedge funds, as they are the ones buying and selling the stock and are primarily affected by the increase and decrease of the stock prices. Secondly, who are the parties involved in the system and what facts will prevent them from successfully implementing the solution? The actors identified in the system are social media such as Reddit, Facebook and Discord. The trading apps are also actors and also the regulators, all of which might be prevented by certain laws and regulations from implementing the necessary solutions. Thirdly, we need to identify the processes in the system, the inputs and outputs into and out of the system. Here, the primary process is the buying and selling of shares. Fourthly, you need to take an eagle-eye view of the system in order to historically understand the bigger impact of the problem. Here we can identify worldviews such as freedom of speech or individual investors and hedge funds freedom to buy and sell shares as they please. Fifthly, you need to identify who the process owner is and what the role is that they are playing in the problem, as well as the solution. Strangely enough, the owner is not GameStop, but rather the stock market. Lastly, we need to identify environmental constraints that might hinder the solution and its success. The environmental constraints identified include regulation constraints, ethical constraints, and law-based constraints. The fourth stage of the 7 stages description involves building conceptual models around root definitions identified, and the fifth stage involves comparing these models to the problem situation expressed in stage 2. If we look at the behavior over time graph, we can clearly see how the Reddit investors managed to manipulate GameStop stock. Causal loops are used to illustrate how parts of a system affect one another. Balancing loops refers to elements in the system that continue to go up and down. When hedge funds sell stock, stock prices go down, but when they buy stock back, it goes up again, causing balancing loops. However, when the Redditors continue to buy stock, what we saw was what is referred to as a reinforcing loop. Reinforcing loops occur when elements continue in the same direction. The continuous buying of stocks results in stock prices to continue to grow. However, with reinforcing loops, eventually the system becomes saturated and stops growing despite everyone's increased efforts. It might even lead to the system eventually declining or crashing. This is referred to as the limits of growth archetype. Stage 6 of the 7 stages description involves us identifying which changes are possible to implement. From my analysis of this system, it became clear that the issue here is that there is a lack of proper regulations which enables individual investors to manipulate stock prices. The following regulations are proposed. Regulations requiring the monitoring of social media to identify and prevent coordinated buying and selling of stock. Regulations for trading apps, as well as their conflict of interest in accepting funds from hedge funds and their practices of restricting the buying and selling of stocks. Regulations pertaining to billboards and what information can be communicated using billboards. Hedge funds also need to be more heavily regulated in terms of their communication of their intention to buy and sell certain stocks, They're selling stocks that they do not even own. They're working together, selling stocks between them in order to manipulate stock prices. If the above can be better regulated, it will prevent both hedge funds and individual investors from manipulating stock prices. Stage 7 of the 7 stages description now involves implementing the most feasible changes and solutions identified. In this case, the creation and implementation of the regulations were identified. In conclusion, the problem identified were investigated using soft systems methodology. It were very useful to make use of the rich picture to explore the system, its various parts, and how they interact with one another. It assisted me greatly to explore the problem from various sources, as various sources had different interpretations on the problem and the role of the various stakeholders involved, thus tapping into various mental models. In order to properly explore the problem, it became critical to not jump to conclusions or make decisions rashly, but to use the steps as identified in the ladder of inference to take proper decisions regarding the problem. From my investigations, it became clear that should there not be proper regulations put in place, the problem will most definitely continue into the future. Soft systems methodology will be very valuable to explore problems and its influence on the different elements in the workplace, especially involving as many diverse people as possible when exploring a problem, in order to tap into various mental models. Definitely, the use of rich pictures to explore problems in the workplace will give a better understanding of the system within which it operates. Systems is all around us, and we should adopt systems thinking in our everyday life through looking at the various parts and how they affect and influence one another in the world.